All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another Emerald City Hockey Postgame Live. Fortunate one after that 5-3 loss to the Nashville Predators. It's kind of a tough game there for the Seattle Kraken. Took them I was going to say a while to get going, but really it took them a long time to get going in this one. I mean, it was only a couple minutes left in the second period by the time the Kraken were able to get to 10 shots on goal. Just didn't feel like they were really in it in the same way that Nashville was to kind of start this game. And then you have a couple tough goals against, right? The one that goes off Shane's stick and between Joey's legs, and then the other one that ramps up Josh Mahura's stick and kind of past Joey's leg pad. Just kind of it was just one of those nights kind of all the way around for everybody. There we go. It looks like RJ's good to go with us. There we go.
Hey, Dylan. Sorry about that.
It's no worries, no
Got it
worries.
figured out.
Yep. Yeah, tough one here, RJ, as we kick off ECH post game live presented by Queen Anne Beer Hall.
Yeah, tough one, and I'm not sure what you've already said, but my main takeaway from this game is, look, as we approach the trade deadline, if we're looking for silver linings, maybe it's for the best that the Kraken go to the trade deadline coming off of a game that, maybe reminds us why some of these changes that are happening need to happen. That's kind of my big takeaway from this one.
Yeah, this very much felt that way. And you know what? It sure sounded like Eddie Olczyk felt that way too. He was very blunt during this broadcast, really kind of throughout, calling out effort stuff, calling out people needing to feel like jobs are on the line, all sorts of stuff. So we shall see. We shall see. Now, do we have information on the beer hall stuff yet? Have we heard back from them?
I have the dates. They just haven't 100% confirmed to me that they could do it. I have the dates. I could just float them out to everybody and say it's like
let's
95%.
pencil it in. Yeah.
Pencil it in. Write it with pencil, not with pen. But the dates for the watch parties should be March 19th. I believe that's a Wednesday, March 19th at Queen Anne Beer Hall. And I'm trying to quickly look up what the opponent is on that one. So yeah, it'll be Wednesday, March 19th at Minnesota, 6:30 p.m. at Queen Anne Beer Hall. And then Wednesday, April 2nd, 7:30 p.m. start time for that one. The game is at Vancouver, and that watch party will be at Moss Bay Hall on the east side in Kirkland. So pencil those two dates in. We're really looking forward to seeing everybody.
Oh yeah, definitely excited to get some watch parties underway since we've been up here. And good news also, RJ and I should both be at both of those. Now we might not both finish there. Somebody's got to go and start post game, but we're going to be able to be there for at least like 2 periods each of us for both of those watch parties. So should be a good time. Got a couple super chats here to kick us off. RJ, first one's from Sean. That game kind of sucked. Let's talk about trades instead. Definitely trade stuff to talk about. I don't know. Should we maybe wait just like a second and get through some of the game stuff before we get to the trades?
Yeah, probably, given it is a post-game live. We will talk plenty about the trade that the Kraken have already done. We'll talk about the future trades. And of course, just really quick, want to plug tomorrow, the Armchair GM stream at 7 p.m. for the patrons. I will go over every trade that the Kraken made and maybe some that they didn't make after talking to Ron Francis, after getting all the information there from tomorrow. So looking forward to joining everyone for that.
Definitely. So we will come back to that, Sean, but really appreciate the super chat. And then DJ Singleton with the super chat. Always a fun time to see a prospect debut. And yes, RJ, it is always good to see that. We get Jacob Melanson in this one. And you know what? He played pretty good. He was good on the forecheck. I thought he played with good energy. It's contrasted against the rest of the team that maybe didn't have that great energy, certainly earlier on in this game. But I thought that he had good energy, drew a penalty, right? Working hard. And, he was trying to lay some hits out there, trying to, stir up the pot a little bit in the way that he does.
Yeah, and I'm really glad to hear that from you, Dylan, because I know, you haven't always been the biggest Jacob Melanson fan. Think about your prospect chats, and you've kind of maybe questioned whether he has what it takes to stick up at the NHL level. And I think there are still some questions on that, of course. It's just his one game in the NHL. But I thought he had a pretty good showing for himself tonight, especially, as you said, on a night where there were a lot of guys that maybe weren't giving the full energy that you'd expect. Melanson was fully engaged. He was stirring stuff up, even in the first period, going to the net, giving that little bit extra. It just felt like Yanni Gourde was kind of still out there in that moment, in that scrum. So that was kind of cool to see from him. A little under 10 minutes, 9:53 tonight, but 4 hits. I believe that's second on the team to Eli Tolvanen in this one. And you know what? He drew a penalty too. I like that.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. He did that. That was fantastic. That's probably the biggest impact that he made on the night was that drawn penalty. You mentioned the 4 hits. I thought that was good. I think that, game is faster than he's used to, and I think he'll kind of get better as he adjusts to that speed. There was quite a few times where he was kind of going to lay out big hits, and guys were able to maybe sidestep him at the last moment there. But I think that that's something that he'll learn, he'll adjust to. Got to think that you're still just working through all the nerves of the last 24 hours of getting the call up, getting out to Nashville, getting in the game, and kind of going through the motions of your first handful of shifts as an NHL player. So I got to think that stuff will kind of figure itself out as things go. But as long as he plays with that energy and with that physicality and doesn't take penalties, as long as he can kind of stick to drawing the penalties rather than taking the penalties, I think that he can maybe carve out a role for himself on the 4th line the rest of the way this season, just because probably going to see a turbo trade sometime here before the deadline midday tomorrow, and with Yanni Gourde already gone, there's kind of room for that at the bottom of this lineup.
Yeah, definitely. And it is an element that they really haven't had a kind of a real pest, real agitator. And because I think he goes a little bit beyond maybe what Yanni Gourde would do in that department. And it's something the Kraken haven't really seen all season, especially down the stretch as the wins and losses don't matter a ton, right? And you're just looking for entertaining parts of a game. He's someone who can bring that.
Right. And does it from the wing instead of having to do it down the middle. So you kind of can then free up the center spot for a little bit more as well. So like that. Super chat here from Paul. We'll be at the Moss Bay game. My 12-year-old wants to be there. That's awesome, Paul. Can't wait to meet you and your 12-year-old there. Should be a ton of fun.
Yeah, love to hear that. So excited to see everyone again. I mean, it's been too long since we've had a watch party, and we're so excited.
Yes, definitely. Other things in this game, RJ and Jeremy kicking off the chat with it. Mikey Eyssimont picks up a goal, first Kraken game. Pretty solid for a guy that felt like it was just, maybe thrown in to help make some money work in the big trade yesterday.
Yeah, no, I liked what I saw from him. Kind of a simplified game. And I think, in a sense, in a game like this, that kind of works pretty well when you're just looking for hustle. You're looking for guys making the simple play. And I think 3 shots for him in this game. And, that's as advertised. He has a very high shot rate for time on ice, one of the highest in the NHL. And so he came as advertised in this game. And I like that he had a wraparound attempt. He had a couple other looks on net, but he's just looking to put the puck on net, play it simple. And that's something, again, I think the Kraken could use more of this season.
I certainly, right? I mean, it was there was under 5 minutes left in the second period by the time the Kraken get to 10 shots on goal in this one. Like, if some of that shooter's mentality was to rub off on some other guys in this lineup, I would not be complaining. This is something that they have needed. So I'm all for bringing in more guys that are going to have that mentality out there on the ice. And then, again, gets the goal on the one shot that he doesn't really shoot. But, I was going to say, he gets rewarded for it with the goal. Not technically, but, still nice to get that first goal out of the way in a Kraken sweater, I'm sure. The tank rolls on. At least we got a Canner goal out of it. That was the other nice thing about this game, RJ. Jared McCann gets on the board. I'll kind of say it again. I said this last time he scored. Hopefully this maybe gets him going and we're able to see some more consistent offense from him. But it was great to see him pick up a power play goal at that, RJ.
Definitely. And on the power play, I think is the important part of this one where Dylan, do you know the last time he scored on the power play?
It was a while ago.
It was November 5th, over 4 months ago, his last power play goal. And so, good to see him get on the board with the extra man, but I think it really does highlight something this season that they just haven't been able to get Canner going on the power play. But this looked like vintage Jared McCann from the last couple seasons where he has been able to kind of pace the Kraken on the power play as far as scoring. And just we haven't seen it this year, but good to see it tonight.
Definitely. I'm trying to pull up the line stuff on Money Puck just to kind of see which lines were doing what, because it very much felt like, at least through the first 2 periods of this game, RJ, when the Kraken were really struggling and they were just really kind of stuck in their own zone. I mean, the whole first period felt like it was played in the Kraken zone. They just could not get the puck up the ice. It felt like that Beniers line, kind of as always, was the only one with some consistent possession time for the Kraken. And then that Shane Wright line that Jared McCann is a part of, felt like the only one that was ever kind of generating chances. It was not a lot of chances. They were kind of few and far between, but it did feel like through the first probably 30 minutes of this game, the only time we were seeing any of those chances, it was from that Shane and McCann Berkey line. In this one, things are not favorable to any of these lines as I kind of
No,
get there.
the fourth line really the
Fourth
only one with
line,
over
yeah.
50% of the expected goal share.
Mikey A. Smart is going to do that for you with all those shots he takes, though. So
That's
you
true.
go.
It will juice those stats for sure.
Gonna goose the numbers just a little bit. Did Will Canner not be traded then? Yes, it sounds like according to like Elliot Friedman and stuff, Seattle's not interested in moving Jared McCann.
Yeah, all the talk around him has just been in terms of teams calling the Kraken asking if they would do that. And why not? You should be calling and asking about Jared McCann if you are a team that's looking to add at the trade deadline.
Yep. Your head Team Take will be thrilled. Played better in the third, at least, on to Broad Street. They did play better in the third, RJ. Obviously, that's kind of too little too late, which has been a lot of the story of this season.
That's their
so
thing.
far. This has very much been their thing. It's just kind of frustrating, right? I mean, we had such a good game that the other night in Seattle here, where it was a competitive game, right? They found ways of kind of staying in it. Yes, Minnesota was able to do what they were able to do. Minnesota walks out of the building with the 2 points, all of that kind of stuff. But the Kraken did a good job of making the game feel competitive through most of it. And that just kind of wasn't here tonight. And it really showed, the end result is the same in the sense that the Kraken pick up another loss, which is something that they've done a lot of this year. But just the difference in effort and quality of hockey was so stark between Tuesday and tonight. And it's just, gosh, it makes me really cherish those games that we saw on Tuesday all the more, just because it was good hockey, at least, right? The team was competitive. They were in it. You felt like there was stuff that you could root for and cheer for them. And it really highlights how kind of little that's been this season with this group.
Absolutely. These last two games have been materially different in that sense. And if you look back to Tuesday, the Kraken found a way to get back within one going into the third. There was that urgency, really, even at the halfway point of the game, when you had the missed penalty shot, the power play opportunity, all that stuff, where the Kraken were trying to get themselves back in the game and did get close. And in the third period, down by a goal, 11-1, the shots on goal for you in that period. That was a proper push. And by the way, against a good hockey team, I think quality of opponent also matters here. Nashville's not a good hockey team. They're one of the few teams below the Kraken in the standings. You have to adjust for that as well. And so the overall picture just looks a lot better Tuesday than it does today.
Yes, it does. Zach, cups of coffee can't come soon enough. Young guys are the only ones trying, and even being pro tank, I can't stand low effort hockey. So Zach kind of agreeing with what we're talking about. We talked about Melanson and the energy that he was able to play with tonight. Do you think, based off of what Melanson was able to do tonight, we maybe see more call-ups down the stretch here, maybe sooner rather than later? Because I think late season, that's maybe more of a given. But do you think we see something maybe a little bit sooner, or do you think for now Melanson is kind of the one?
I would think for now he's kind of the one, just because I don't know. They've already kind of called up their guys to have 23 on the roster. I know Tanev's going to go here, but you got Ty Karche coming up from the conditioning stint. I'd imagine he'd probably be next in line if you have another forward go in. So I don't know that we'll see him right away, but certainly if effort's going to be an issue down the stretch, call up the young guys. One thing they have showed you, I think, pretty consistently is that they are going to be focused. They are going to give it their all. They may make some mistakes that young players make, but I think just having that focus and that effort is an improvement over what some of the guys are giving.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do think that we'll see maybe another call up at some point down the line, whether it's like a Ryan Winterton, try to work him in, get him ready for next season. Maybe
feels like we haven't really talked about him in a while, but I mean, he almost made the team out of camp. If not for cap reasons, he would have.
Yeah.
But I think, the idea has been to keep him in CV and let him keep developing there. But God, I think we see him in a Kraken jersey sooner rather than later, right?
I would think so, and I would think that you'd want to gotta go with him. I mean, maybe you do reward somebody like a Yanni Newman just because he is doing so well at the AHL level, and you kind of just give him that idea of like, this is what the NHL is going to look like for you, and this is what you're gonna have to work on over the course of the offseason and enter camp next year, kind of preparing for. But I got to think that, yeah, for guys like Ryan Winterton that or you want to kind of be a a feature on your bottom six next season, maybe you want to get them. Maybe you want to get a guy like that a little bit more reps there. Daniel asking, when and why is it a good idea for defensemen to leave the front of their own net while the other team is cycling the puck? Now, this is a good question, Daniel. I wish I had preloaded in all of those like graphics I had made from my defensive systems video over this past offseason. But basically, in the zone defense that the Kraken runs, 2-3 zone, the primary pressure of the puck carrier, if the puck carrier for the other team is going to be in the lower half of the zone, is actually going to be your strong side defenseman. So that's going to be your defenseman on whichever side of the ice that the puck carrier is on. And so that defenseman's job is not to be in front of the net. It's actually to go and physically engage whoever is carrying the puck, whoever is in the middle of that cycle. It's to try to pin them down, pin them up against the wall, pin them in the corner, and then have your center usually, but your F1, it's usually the center, come in and try to steal that puck and start play moving up the ice. The person who's supposed to kind of help cover for the front of the net alongside the weak side defenseman is going to be your weak side winger. And that's where things have been a little sketchy this season when I talk about the team defense or the forwards not helping out a lot this year in the defensive zone and kind of not covering the gaps that they need to cover. That's kind of what I'm talking about. There's been a lot of times this year where the defensemen are doing their job. You have one net front, one pressuring the puck carrier, and then either the defenseman pressuring the puck carrier doesn't have support from the F1 kind of fast enough in order to get control of the puck and start moving it up the ice, or we're not seeing that weak side winger kind of drop down low enough into the zone to help defend the slot or help defend the net front all the time. But that is why often when you're going to watch the Kraken and the other team is cycling the puck and they have the puck down low, that's why there's only one defenseman there. That's just the system that they're running.
Yeah, good explanation there, Dylan. And I do want to, if I can kind of go down to the bottom of chat here, I just see Sam, hello, Wandering Bolts fan, going to miss Mikey, not a ton of skill, but he gives 100% every shift. And so I just love when, fans of opposing teams come in here. I mean, I guess they weren't the opponent tonight, but just appreciate that little tidbit there on Mikey Asamot. I mean, certainly gave the effort tonight for the Kraken.
I was going to say he was a winger who was dropping down and helping out in the defensive zone. I mean, that is part of his game, and he looked good at it today. So I do appreciate that for sure. Bryce with the shout out for the fourth line. They were humming tonight for sure. Lindsay, I know it's rough now, but we might look back on this game and realize how key it was to our tanking if it helps Nashville and Buffalo leapfrog us. I mean, that is like one of the silver linings. Like, again, I would be okay with the end result of the Kraken losing if the effort and the hockey was better, right? Then I could really be on board more so with this game. It's hard to get on board with like, oh, okay, hey, we got the L, it helps the tank, helps draft position, all that stuff. When it looks this rough, RJ, for as long as it does, it's hard to then want to support it at all.
I get where you're coming from, but you know what? I guess the good news is that however they got there, you still do get the L for the draft position potentially. And this, I wasn't going to mention it or bring it up unless it was brought up by somebody else. So now I can talk about it, I think. But going into this game, I was thinking, regardless of what it turned out to be, this would be a really important game for the Kraken to lose if they're going to have a shot at top 3 lottery odds, which, as you've discussed, with there kind of being a clear top 4 in the draft, you really need to be top 3 lottery odds to kind of feel like you're guaranteed one of those top 4 picks. And Nashville is because Chicago and San Jose, no one's catching them, but Nashville would be the team to pass the Kraken to get them into that all important 3rd spot. They're now 3 points back with a game in hand. So, it's a little more possible if you are focused on the draft lottery and that sort of thing. This game, I maybe counts more than others in a sense, is in terms of losing it.
No, I'm there with you. I think this is a probably a better question for you than I, RJ. It's from Terrible Lotus. What makes ice quality bad, especially at the NHL level?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'll try and answer this as best as I can. But I mean, at the NHL level, like ice quality, usually the problem is that it's too warm or humid in the building. And what that leads to is ice that's kind of a little bit soft, a little bit like too soft, right? And it gets kind of puddly. And so the puck sticks a little bit more. Skates can kind of get caught in it. And then also the puck just bounces a little bit more too. That's something you notice if it's kind of bouncing over sticks, because the warmer it gets, the more that puck will bounce on the ice. If you kind of get in the right temperature area, it lays nice and flat, and passes go crisply and all that stuff. But with bad ice, usually the problem is that it's too warm, and humidity is just a killer on ice. And so that's why teams will sometimes install dehumidifiers in their building. I remember growing up a Sharks fan, the Sharks had a run of bad ice for a few years, and they ended up installing these massive dehumidifiers at their old arena at SAP Center that wasn't really built for it, and the ice got a lot better. You can also have problems like for the outdoor games when it's really cold and snowing. If it gets too cold, that creates other problems as well, where the ice gets too hard and it gets really brittle, and then skates can kind of get into it and stick a little bit, and that's a whole other issue. But usually you don't get that indoors.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, you can get like brittle and it's just like a mess when it gets too cold. Yeah, the humidity, especially in the South. So teams like Nashville, the Florida teams, Carolina, that's where those buildings, the people in charge of the ice there, they have their work cut out for them, and they really do a great job of making it as good as they can. It's a tough job for sure. And one of the other things that we talk about, right, because the ice can be bad, and it did seem like the ice was kind of bad in this one. One of the other things that can kind of affect play overall when it comes to passing, shooting, puck handling, all of that kind of stuff. It's not just that the ice kind of maybe isn't as cold as it needs to be, and then that can create issues. The puck can also heat up, and if the puck starts getting too warm, it gets a little bit more active. It starts to get a little bit more bouncy. For those who don't know, NHL pucks are cooled off. They are held in a freezer, kind of, and
which is kind of kept. By the way, it's kept between the penalty boxes. So if you ever want to know where the freezer is, the refs will go over, the linesman will go get a new puck fresh out of the freezer. So if you keep an eye on the broadcast, sometimes they will show that. Also, when they're lining up for a face-off, and if there's time before the centers get there, the linesman will just put the puck down on the ice to keep it cold, rather than just be holding it in their hand the whole time. It's little things to look out for.
Yeah, so just wanted to throw that one out there because not a lot of people know that.
Lindsay, Emerald City physics class is in session.
Yeah, oh jeez, not quite, but
we're at that point of the season.
Yep. I think it's probably time that we can start talking. We could go back to Sean's super chat now and bring up some of the trades or the trade that happened, RJ, and that was of course the big one yesterday. I mean, where do we even begin? But Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand going to the Tampa Bay Lightning end up, Gourde assisting Bjorkstrand on the game-winning goal in that game for the Lightning tonight. But the two of them heading over to the Tampa Bay Lightning, Gourde via Detroit, just for some extra salary retention there. But coming back the Kraken way ultimately was, of course, Mikey Eyssimont, who played tonight for them. And then 2 first-round picks, 2026 and 2027, Tampa Bay Lightning first-round picks. And then a second-round pick this year that was the Toronto pick. Yeah, the Toronto pick in the second round. So very healthy return for Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde, RJ. And importantly, no retention on Oliver Bjorkstrand into next season.
Yeah, that is a huge part of this trade as well. So you get that full Bjorkstrand contract off of the books. So there's no lasting cap impact for next year. I didn't think that might even be possible for a deal like this with Gourde and Bjorkstrand going to Tampa, just given their lack of cap space, but getting the double retention on Gourde makes that possible. But looking at the big picture of this trade, I think this is a fantastic return for the Kraken. This is excellent value for Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand. And I think Ron Francis might be not all too eager to move guys with term like a Bjorkstrand, but when you have this kind of deal in front of you, how do you not pull the trigger? I mean, 2 first-round picks, 26 and 27 for Tampa. Both of those are top 10 protected. And if either of those ends up being top 10, moves back a year, then the Kraken will be given a 3rd round pick additionally for each one of those picks that would move back. Still unlikely, but this is just a massive haul of assets. And I said it before the deadline. The Kraken needed to go into this trade deadline with an eye toward the offseason to accumulate assets, accumulate ammunition to go out and be aggressive in the trade market this offseason. And that's exactly what this trade does. Those 2 future firsts are some prime assets that teams that are maybe looking at the future a little bit more could probably be interested in. A 2nd round pick this year, that's another valuable asset. And you can take those plus your prospects, plus your existing picks, and you can be really aggressive in the trade market this summer. So this is the kind of trade that the Kraken should be making at the deadline, the kind of trade they should be looking to do more of if an opportunity like that for maybe Alexiak, Schwartz, whatever, presents itself tomorrow.
Definitely. I think the return was fantastic. And just to kind of focus on the present, because you did such a good job talking about the future there and what it means for the upcoming offseason and the ammunition that Ron Francis now has, or whatever GM is in that role come the offseason, because there's just been plenty of conversation around that in chat that we can get to as well. I think even for the now though, like this was just such a healthy return. I mean, this is a much better trade than we were predicting as far as value coming back for a Yanni Gourde. I think if you were to talk to us and ask us about, okay, Bjorkstrand actually gets traded, what do you think the return is? Kind of breaking it down, if you figure maybe a first for the half season left of Yanni Gourde, and then a first and a second for Oliver Bjorkstrand, and you don't have to retain. I take that every day of the week. Like, that's higher than I would have guessed Ron Francis could go out there and get. And so this is one of those moments where it does feel like Ron Francis kind of did it again. If we judge him and kind of leave out free agency, he is able to pull these good trades out. Whether it's picking up Oliver Bjorkstrand for what he was able to get and take advantage of the Columbus situation there, or whether it's this deadline trade, some of the previous deadline trades, like going back to Jeremy Lauzon, just because we played Nashville tonight. Ron Francis is able to get decent returns that do make it feel like other teams have to overpay for some of his guys.
Yeah, and I do think I don't want to take anything away from Francis on this trade, because I think he did a fantastic job, but it has been a crazy seller's market so far in this trade deadline. Unlike anything I really can remember ever seeing, the inflated prices for some of these players going. We saw it with some of the deals today. Brian Dumoulin for a second round pick. I mean, we're seeing guys, it's very expensive out there at the trade deadline. And so I don't think this is entirely, Francis just working this negotiation. I think this is a bit of a theme for this trade deadline, but credit to Francis for taking advantage of it. And I do want to answer this question here from B, because I think it is a good one. Bit of a random question on the conditions, but if the Kraken trade one of those first from Tampa and it ends up being a top 10 pick, do the Kraken get that extra third, or does the team they trade the first to get it? It would be the Kraken that get that extra third round pick, regardless of who owns it at that time.
Yeah,
but good question there, B.
Really good question.
Not entirely clear initially.
Yeah, no, definitely good question there. JTB Hockey with the super chat here. Appreciate it. I was at the game tonight. Even after scoring first, the Kraken looked totally defeated, not much energy, but was glad to see Asamoah score tonight. Kind of on that theme, RJ, kind of coming back to the game this evening from that bit of trade talk. We talked about it earlier, right? Eddie Olczyk kind of talked about it. One of the things that we had talked about last season under coach Dave Hackstall, one of the things that was talked about over the offseason was that kind of need for there to be more accountability within the team and on the team and from the coaching staff maybe. And I do wonder, are we kind of back to that just a little bit? Because that's basically what Edzo's kind of talking about, right? And I'm seeing more stuff in here, like Luke, Eddie is 100% right. It's a coaching issue, continuing to play people who aren't making the effort. I mean, I think everybody finds a way to have the effort through part of the game. It's just that full 60 that's really been lacking for a lot of this season. But it does kind of feel like we're back to the same question under a different coaching staff of, are maybe some of these guys being given a little bit too much slack, or is there not enough accountability for when guys, go out there and they kind of coast for maybe the first 40 minutes and then they wake up in the final frame, but it's too late for it to make a difference?
I think it is worthwhile to ask those questions at this point. And they're the kind of questions that Edzo was asking in his rant, right? Where he was saying, you just got to find the guys who are willing to give you effort and play, and just play them a bunch. Don't worry about who's supposed to be your top line or hurting anyone's feelings. Just find the guys who will give you effort and put them out on the ice. And that isn't necessarily what we're seeing. I feel like right now, I think there was, a little bit of that where, as I kind of, sort by guys, who was on the ice for the goals against and whatnot, they are some of the guys who did end up getting less ice time as the game went on. But still, I think it's also tough around trade deadline season where, look, after a game like this, I'd want to scratch somebody, somebody kind of noteworthy, right? But, with Tanev going and guys in and out of the lineup, it's a little harder to do. But I think especially as the dust settles after the trade deadline tomorrow, maybe you can look at sending some of those messages.
Yeah. And I think that this is where especially because we were just talking about it, right? And you see Melanson come up today talking about other guys potentially coming up and getting a cup of coffee at the NHL level. It's a lot easier to do down the stretch when you're in a position that the Kraken are in, where you're definitely not making the playoffs, right? You're just kind of trying to play things out to a certain extent. It's a lot easier to then maybe start doing that, and you can really, you can do it kind of under the guise of looking towards the future and trying to get those guys some NHL experience before they come into training camp next season and everything. But veterans know what's up, and they kind of know what's happening there, and you are still sending the message of, look, we want to see what these young guys have, rather than just, we know what we have in you and we're looking for more, by bringing those young guys up and putting them in the lineup. So I do think that is coming, but I'm with you. It's kind of hard to do right now at this point in the season, but give it another 4 or 5 games, and I think you can really start playing that card.
Yeah, I agreed with the timing on that. And Zoe, no, I wasn't implying that like the top line wasn't putting in effort. No, I thought the Matty Beniers line, had some of the best shifts for the team. That wasn't what I was implying by that. Just basically, I was kind of paraphrasing Edzo, but just don't worry about, who's supposed to be getting the most ice time or not. Just give it to the guys who are giving effort.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't matter what contract they're on, doesn't matter, where their perceived spot is in the lineup. At the end of the day, you have to not only produce, you have to, show up, and you have to put on a show, and you have to be entertaining, and you have to, go out there and give fans something to cheer for. And as we talked about earlier, and we talked about after last game, right? Effort and just good hockey, close games, that's, everybody can get on board with that. Even if you're losing, people can still be on board with that. They can be excited, they can want to go to those games, but you have to give that effort. You have to still play good hockey. So definitely have to kind of reward the guys that are willing to do that, and sit the ones that aren't, even if it's hard to do.
And Alex saying this is kind of the sentiment I'm getting at when I say there are too many passengers on this team, not about driving actual play on the ice, but more of just of a team culture thing.
Yeah. And then it gets into the larger conversations of, we're having this conversation again under a separate coaching staff another year later. What does that mean? Maybe about like some of the core group of the team. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I can't believe I'm doing this, but Jason, 22-33 for Stevenson doesn't sound like effort-based ice time to me. He actually was one of the few Kraken who are not on the ice for a goal against.
Yeah, no, he actually didn't play that bad of a game in this one. I don't.
That's why when I was looking at it, I was kind of looking at the players who got massive ice time, and I was ready to be, Stevenson, but he actually played all right.
Yeah, especially because in like the second period, it felt like that line wasn't getting caved in the way some of the other lines on this team were. They were able to at least get the puck up the ice.
And particularly Shane Wright also, I just felt like it was, look, you're going to have games like this when you're 21, but it was kind of a rough night for him. And Definitely. So, I look at the ice time, 14:05, totally fine with that number tonight.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense why that is. From the L train here, Holy, in Lars's interview with Piper, he sounded so defeated. The body language said he was so frustrated. This is where it really starts piling on, I think, for everybody, is because, yes, you've been losing a lot this season, and that's always difficult. But when you get to the trade deadline and you're a team that has been losing and you're out of the playoff picture, and it's now resulting in your friends, your buddies getting moved and going somewhere else, it kind of kicks it up a notch, and it kind of goes into that spot where it really does feel like it affects you that much more. We see it affect them that much more, RJ.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just a tough time of year for everybody, whether you get dealt or not. I mean, I remember when Grubauer got sent down to Coachella Valley, and it was Larson who we talked to, and he just said, it's not just, that happening for him. It's just, this is a friend, someone we love, who's just not around anymore. And at the trade deadline, it feels even more permanent than that. Grubauer was at least able to come back, but it's tough on everyone involved.
Yeah, it really is. Sticking with Adam Larson, though, via Ren letting us know, Larson has scored 25 goals as a member of the Seattle Kraken. 5 of them have been against the Nashville Predators. So,
wow.
Just throwing that
That's a
out there.
cool stat. And I was looking at the Kraken all-time goal scoring leaders too, and I believe Shane Wright is right behind Adam Larson. Larson's the next guy that he has to catch. So Lars gaining a little bit more ground there. I think Shane is now like 6 back of him.
Trying to build that cushion in there. James, draft question. The more I see people talk about him, the more I think Hagens may be Beniers-esque. If he's best available at the 4th pick and Kraken are on the clock, do the Kraken take him? I'd prefer a winger or a defenseman. I think if the Kraken are picking 4th, you take whichever one of the 4 guys from the top 4 is still available and is there. I think if you're picking at the top end of the draft, you always have to go best available, even if it means adding to a strength, even if it means, you're not necessarily addressing a position that you want long term. It is better to take the prospect that has a better chance of making the NHL, better chance of being a star player at the NHL level, because you could always make a move later. You can always address those needs later, but you can't afford to get, especially a top 5 draft pick, wrong. And so I always believe in the idea of taking best available player there. If that's Hagens, yes, Kraken need another center like they need a hole in the head, but you take James Hagens over anybody else. And for everybody, I think that those 4 players this year, and maybe I'll try to order them in order I think they are. It's Schaefer 1 for me for sure. Probably Misa 2, and then Hagens, and then Porter Martone. That's probably how I would order those guys. I think there's a real chance that Martone falls to 4 out of those top 4. And so if the Kraken do end up picking 4 kind of in that spot, it could just work out that they are getting somebody who's maybe a little bit more NHL ready because he's older, plays a position that they need, has size, which is something that they need. Everything can kind of work out for them. But I would say if the Kraken say win a lottery and move up to 2, just because Martone fits all of those things, I would still take Schaefer or Misa if they're on the board, because I think they're just better players.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you have to go best player available there. And as I see Zach in chat, Roger McQueen erasure. Care to address that one, Dylan?
He's good. He's not as good as those other guys. Those other guys are in a tier to themselves. Nobody else kind of touches them in this draft class.
All right. And then, by the way, Zoe and Viren, I see your questions down there in chat on the scratch thing, and I haven't ignored them. We can come back around to them when the time is right. But I just want you to know, like, that those are good questions, and I haven't.
We can answer them now if you
want.
All
right, let's do it.
Yeah.
So Zoe, I come back to it. If you're the coach, what guys are you scratching first? Because I think it is a logical continuation of the last conversation, right? And Viren, so the team gave a bad effort, but every individual player was fine. No, I don't think that's the case. And if I'm looking, first of all, if I'm looking at scratches, I base it usually off the last game or 2 games.
Yeah.
I want it to be kind of a direct message. Like the guy that stands out most for me tonight, look, Shane had a rough game, but you're not scratching him. Burakovsky, probably for me. Another one, he'd probably be the first guy.
He was the one I was thinking of.
Yeah. So he is probably who I would go with.
Yeah, Berkey is definitely the one that I was kind of thinking of. I think that this is also something that doesn't have to just apply to forwards. I think that you can also look on the back end. Yeah, especially with you making the call up that they made with Fleury, but like Riker Evans.
Yeah, he had a
rough game. Really rough game. Like if he had to sit for a game, I don't think that kind of messes things up at all. I think if you were to see that kind of performance from somebody in Shane Wright's spot, who isn't Shane Wright, who isn't a young player the way he is, that would be like kind of the obvious pull. But he gets a pass just because he's young, not because he had a good individual performance tonight, despite what the numbers say. It's just more so like that's just what you sign up for in somebody's first full NHL season. But the 2 players that I thought of, 1 forward, 1 defenseman, it would have been Berkey and it would be Riker Evans.
Agree with you on those 2. Yeah.
Okay, there. And Viren, I honestly don't know what they're doing with Winterton. I guess they're just trying not to. I don't know. He's at the age, right, where ELC years are going off the books anyway. So I don't know.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of Vince Dunn mentions in here as far as a potential scratch, and like I haven't liked some of the D zone turnovers we've seen recently. This one, he just lost an edge. That was just a rough one for Dunn. I don't blame him for that one. But the overall body of work, I still think he's been one of the Kraken's best players over the last 10 or so games. It's just I think at times he's trying to do too much because he kind of has to do too much. And so like I understand that's the issue with them. And I don't think a healthy scratch just for maybe your best player, isn't going to help a ton just in that respect. I don't know. Do you disagree?
No, I'm with you. I think he deserves, based on how well he played. I mean, he was arguably like the Kraken's best player during those 2 games at home here, and the way that he played there. So because of that, I think you give him one more game kind of thing before you'd start talking about a scratch and just how important he is to this team. And even still, I mean, he still ends up with 3 shots in this one, 3 blocks, a couple of hits. Like, it's not like he played that bad. It was just kind of a rough game, kind of defensively for everybody out there. And it was very much, you know, full 5-man units being bad defensively. It was just a lot of puck chasing from everybody involved. It wasn't like it was one individual person. But I'm with you on him trying to do way too much, and I think that's where a lot of the turnovers come from, that he's kind of had, right? Because he has had a handful of pretty notable defensive zone turnovers this year, and they very much feel like plays where he is thinking 2 steps ahead of where he's actually at, and then the little things that you have to do to, you know, actually complete plays are getting lost in there.
Yeah, exactly. And I see some people also saying maybe Joey, just to free him of having to play behind this team or whatever.
That needs to happen for sure.
That definitely needs to happen. I think we are starting to see, I don't know if you agree with this, Dylan, but I think we are seeing some signs of fatigue in his game, where he's playing so much and maybe isn't as sharp as he has been earlier this season, just because they're running him into the ground.
They are. And I am really worried about that after this game and after the last game, right? Like,
I thought we might see Grubauer in the third.
I'm kind of surprised that we didn't. Like, why not? I really don't understand at this point why they feel like they just have to stick with Joey kind of no matter what, right? Until it's absolutely ridiculously forced upon them, like it was in that St. Louis game. They're just down the kind of have Joey kind of have to sit out there behind poor defense forever. I mean, maybe they just knew, hey, it's the 3rd period. Our guys always show up in the 3rd period, so it'll be better for him. But still, like, I don't understand the hesitation here. Again, you're out of the playoffs. You know Joey's your guy long term. You don't need to see anything from him. He's obviously put in a great body of work this year. It's not like he really needs to be starting every single game. Like, he doesn't need that at this point. I don't understand this kind of fixation on starting him 80% of the games for this meaningless stretch that they're going to be playing.
I really think it's a fear of the game getting ugly, that if it's one of those games where the team comes out and plays, which really is like 2/3 of the games, maybe
Right.
more, 3/4 of the games, right? Where they come out and just make those defensive errors and give it a really tough game on their goalie, that, and we've talked about this, right? It requires elite goaltending to not get
Right.
ugly.
Joey is covered for that a lot.
And Joey's covered for that. And Grubauer, whatever you think, he hasn't been able to cover for that. Right. And so, you know, you have that potential for it to get ugly really against any team. And so I think there might still be a little fear of that. And you can't afford too many of those games, particularly not at home. And so that's what I was hoping out of any backup that you have. Just don't be afraid to play him. I'm sure Gru will get one of the starts during the back-to-back, but I just hope it goes well enough that they're not afraid to do it more. And Mason asking, do you let Joey make that decision or take it out of his hands? No, you do not let Joey make that decision. No, goalies, I'm sorry. I love goalies. Goalies do not know what's good for them in terms of how many games to play. Ask a goalie how many games they should play. They'll always just say more games. Let me get in a rhythm. I want to play all the games. Goalies don't know what's best for them. You have to make that decision for them.
Yeah. But going back to what you're talking about, I will pull out my kind of age-old thing, which is should never be coaching scared, right? That's the one thing that I just refuse to believe in, is the idea of coaching scared. So if it's Grubauer that scares you, bring up Stezzy and have him be the backup and you play Stezzy and you go that way. If it's the team's play that's scaring you, then let it be ugly for like 2 games in a row and lay in everybody. Do massive amounts of scratches, right? Scratch 3 players after one of those games. Lay into them. If they're really that bad and you're that afraid that you're going to have to overwork your franchise goaltender just so that you can lose 5-3 in a still ugly fashion, then you have much larger problems that you have to be dealing with, and you have to be dealing with them. You can't just hide behind your goaltender and kind of ignore them, right? That tells me then that there is something far more systemic at play there that you have to be dealing with, whether you're the coach, the front office, just the organization in general. If that is the thinking and that is the philosophy, then you have very large problems you have to be figuring out. So I just think, and I've said it before, right? This is probably my most consistent coaching take, but that is that you never coach scared, right? You can't be an effective leader if you are leading scared, whether you're a team captain out there on the ice, whether you're a coach, whether you're a front office, in any part of life. Actually, it doesn't even just apply to hockey. Effective leaders never lead scared, and so you just can't do that if you're the coach. Figure out a way of making it work. JTB Hockey with another super chat. Appreciate it. Totally hypothetical, but if Dan doesn't return or if he is let go early next year, who do you think the Kraken would seek as the next coach? I mean, it would depend on a lot of factors.
It would, and I don't want to sidestep your question here, JTB, but if Dan gets let go this offseason or maybe early next season, I think it would have to be part of a major house cleaning, right? If Ron Francis returns, if Bilesma's back as coach, it means that Ron Francis, I think, is back as GM, right? And so if it's part of a total house cleaning, it's really going to depend on what type of hockey the next GM envisions the Kraken playing and what kind of team he wants to build and what coach he wants to lead that. And until we know who the GM would be, it's really hard to figure out what the coach would be.
Yes, I do think that one of the things that we could potentially see, if there is that kind of large changing of the guard, just based off of a lot of the conversations that we've had this year, conversations that we've had tonight, I do think that maybe you see them go in a different direction, right? Dan is a good coach at, connecting with players one-on-one. He's really good at helping young players develop, all of that kind of stuff. I do think that if the organization, right, the higher ups in the organization do want to see large changes, then I think that you see a front office that maybe wants a team that is going to focus more on effort and is going to focus more on maybe being more physically noticeable than maybe this group has been from a roster construction standpoint. And I would expect a coach that kind of is in line with that as well.
Would you also expect a coach that is maybe more of a, I guess as Morgan Geeky's dad would say, a hardo?
Yes, I would. That's basically what I'm implying. And,
Yes, okay.
obviously they have jobs and stuff, but like a Greg Berube type, a Dean Evison, right? Like those kinds of guys, maybe not even all the way to that extreme, but somebody more in line with that.
Yeah. And Julie asking, pay Jim Montgomery just pay Jim Montgomery $10 billion. I'd be in favor of that if he took the job. Not my money.
Yeah. I mean, just comes in for half a season in St. Louis and bounces.
Yep. Hey, for $10 billion.
$10 billion is a lot of dollars, actually.
Yeah. And Kylie asking, if they gave Hackstall 3 years, why would they get rid of Bilesma after just one? It would be a result of a new GM. And generally, almost always, new GMs get to kind of start with a clean slate and pick their coach. And so a new GM coming in would have the option, I guess, to keep Dan, but usually they want to go with their own guys. So Bilesma would, in that scenario, would be an unfortunate casualty of just a total house cleaning.
Yeah, it would be tough on him for sure. I guess the one way that you could maybe not have that happen is depending on how rough the season finishes. The overall thing is you could maybe see a new GM come in and wants to maybe keep a little bit of continuity from one year to the other for the young guys, right? Like you could maybe look at this and say like, well, he really did help with Shane, and the direction that the organization was going with Shane was certainly picking up steam down the stretch. Capo Caco coming in and Matty Beniers' development. And so maybe you want to keep a Dan around for one more year just to kind of ease that transition for those young guys so that Shane Wright isn't playing with what is like fifth coach in the last 3 years or something insane like that.
Yeah, no, that would be rough, but just unfortunately, it also means the side effect if you are bringing in a new GM, the way to attract the best candidates is not to say, okay, you have to go with this coach we've already pre-selected for you. You're going to have people drop out.
No, I'm just saying that's something that I could think of. If a GM feels like they're going to have a decent runway of job security, I could see them thinking that just on their own, which is the best thing for me long term over the next 3 or 4 years
is how Wright develops.
Is how Shane Wright develops. Maybe Berkeley Catton coming in. Dan has proven to work well with these guys. I want to give him a little bit more time with them while they're still coming into their own. And then I'll bring in the guy that I think takes them to that next level, but maybe we're not there yet. Like that would be something that I would consider if I was somebody coming into the role.
Okay. That makes sense.
Trish with the super chat here. I was at Emerald City Comic Con. Hi, everyone. Hope you had a great time, Trish, at the convention, because I'm assuming you're going to have a better time there than watching this game. I'll just say that. You did not.
Good time to
did
go,
not
good
miss
game to
it.
miss.
Yeah, definitely. But appreciate the super chat, and definitely hope you're having fun. I'm not going to be able to get out there this weekend, but I hope everybody who does has a good time. Lots of stuff here to kind of catch up on. Let me kind of scroll down here towards the bottom. Kylie saying, I thought Stezzy was injured. Do we know definitively kind of on that front? I mean, he played yesterday for the Firebirds, right?
No, that was Osman,
Osman,
actually.
yeah.
So Steska has been out. Yeah, he was not dressed. So I do wonder if there's an injury there. I haven't seen anything definitive about it, but all the signs would point to that. It would explain everything.
Yeah. Bryce, if Joey's recent workload was stretched over a full season, he'd be on pace for 74 starts. That's too many starts. Like, that's just too many. Viren, the guy who does stuff for the Sabres, Marty Baron, is in favor of goalies playing both games of a back-to-back. Wow. I can't, imagine that, RJ, former goalie in favor of goalie.
As I said, goalies don't know what's best for them.
Yep. Alex Asky, wasn't Baron largely a backup?
He was mostly
kind of one of those tweener guys.
Starters. Yeah, I mean, I mostly know him from the end of his career where he was more of a backup. I mean, the moment I associate him with the most is actually, I think, his last career game where Tomas Hertl's between the legs goal kind of ended his career. But he was a pretty solid goalie for a while in the NHL. Yeah, he did play. He had a 72 game season with the Buffalo Sabres in 01-02. So that was just before I started following. At the right before the lockout there. But yeah, that's a solid starter season. Goalies don't play that much anymore.
No, they don't. Joey getting injured was the one thing that kept them from playing him as much as possible. And then he came back and they went right back to it like nothing had happened. Yeah. I mean, I guess at that point they maybe still had hope on the season, right? And that was the thought process. And so you were trying to do that. It's the now time. Once you get past the trade deadline, there is kind of no excuse for it. You gotta think about his well-being there.
Yeah. Got him signed a term. Like, this is important to you.
Right. It's like you just committed to him. You just committed to him. You're presumably going to be buying out Philip Grubauer to make room for him and have him be your guy. You have to start thinking about the long term, even if the people making those decisions maybe don't have that long-term security, right? Whether it's Dan Bilesma, Ron Francis, you could still have kind of the player's best, there. I don't know.
Yeah. Just in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Viren, so a coach that wants to run systems that the roster isn't suited for, isn't that the problem now, or style, if not systems? I think Dan is capable of running different systems. And I think that what Dan wants to run is, I've said this many times and I still stick with it, is the right thing. So presumably if a new GM was to come in and was to keep Dan on board, I would assume that new GM would tailor the roster to better fit the systems, and you wouldn't kind of see the same thing. I think regardless of whether it's Ron, it's Bottrell, or it's a different general manager from outside the organization, RJ, there is going to be significant roster turnover. I don't see how there isn't.
I would hope. And I mean, this trade deadline, at least with the willingness to trade somebody with term, tells me that maybe there will be a little bit more turnover. I mean, there just simply has to be if they want to be competitive. And I hope they've woken up, whoever's in charge has woken up to that reality that you're going to need some big changes, some big swings on the roster. And Viren talking about, they're not able to run the systems, the roster, or the roster isn't suited for the systems you want to run. These are the systems, as you have said, Dylan, that win in the NHL. These are the systems that the good teams run. And so if your roster isn't capable of running them, your roster just isn't good enough. And so hopefully that's where we'll see the change.
Right. And I have to, I guess we have no choice but to assume.
Oh, Viren says, yeah, that was in reference to replacing the coach with someone who wanted to be more physical.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, in that sense, I would think that would be part of a larger change anyway. And you are going to have more size and physicality added to the lineup. In those spots. But yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where I just think, there needs to be that turnover. And I think that we are seeing it, because even though you only traded so far one player with term next year, you're still having the roster spots of Yanni Gordon, Brandon Tanev open up just by the fact that they're going to be gone, not just this year, but next year, right? Assuming they don't re-sign in Seattle, which would be crazy. So you are talking about right now 3 forward spots already open up and kind of up for grabs for next year, because is Asamont really going to hang around? Probably not, right? Like, so I think that those 3 spots are definitely going to be available. I don't think that Ben Myers or Mitchell Stevens has really locked down that 4C spot or shown you anything that would make you think that that's the direction you really need or want to be going in next year. So I think that you're already kind of on your way there with 25% of the forward spots being up for grabs.
Yeah, on your way there. I still think there's more to go, especially in the middle 6. But that's all stuff that we could see.
Yes. Yeah, because you could still do like a Berkey buyout or something like that. So there's still more that can happen for sure. Kylie Francis seems to do well with trades, but not with contracts. But I think he stays another year. It does feel like he's staying another year for right now. I guess we'll see how.
And I've seen a lot of that conversation in here too. As far as Francis stay or go, should he stay? I don't know. I'm starting to kind of resign myself to maybe that's the direction it's going. I hope that the ownership and everyone really reevaluates things once the season is over. I mean, Francis is certainly speaking like he's staying, talking about how you're going to use those picks in the off season and you're going to make those moves and everything. But I think he has every incentive to act as though he's staying until he hears that he's not. And I don't think the team's made a decision on that yet. Again, I still hope that they reevaluate things and kind of see the totality of the situation that Francis has built and make some hard decisions come the off season. But I don't know. I'm getting a little less optimistic as time goes on, just given kind of how everyone's talking and how it feels like everyone's just accepted that he's staying. So, which it still kind of baffles me.
That's the big thing, is that it just feels like all the conversations around everything just are under the assumption that he's staying, or maybe at least staying in some capacity. And maybe we do see something where he moves into more of just a team president role, and Bottrell, assistant GM, comes in as the general manager. And there's still that, it's still like that front office, right? Like maybe that's still something that's on the table. I don't know. It doesn't even feel like that's really on the table anymore. It just feels like it is just Ron.
Yeah, and I don't know how he's done this where everyone just kind of accepts this. And
I mean, it's tough, right? Because you have the roster, which is obviously not up to par, right? It's not up to stuff. It would be better. It would be a better team if it was, right? Like that is certainly there. But it's also, he makes the Capo Caco trade, fantastic trade. Makes the trade yesterday, fantastic trade, right? For what it is. You look at all of the top prospects and the fact that anybody, who tracks prospects talks so glowingly about this farm system and how he was able to, he is the guy ultimately at the top who gets, credit and or blame for that sort of stuff. And in this sense, he can get credit for it. And so I think if you're just making a pros and cons list at like the 3 areas of a GM, and you look at trades, free agency, and drafting, you kind of have to give him trades and drafting, and then the con side only has free agency. So maybe that's where you think, okay, team president, he can still oversee scouting, he can oversee some stuff, but maybe he's not in control of the pen come free agency time.
I'm gonna stop myself because we're 58 minutes into a
I
post
know,
live, and this is not. But if I kept going, I could go full Mugatu here. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, but I'll
it was strictly
you could see it on my face.
Everybody knows where you stand on this for sure. It was strictly to your conversation of like, why would they think that way? I think that would be the line of thinking.
Yeah, and I think tear apart. I'm not one of those arguments, but I won't.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's still the best way to be thinking or the best logic train to follow, but that would be the logic train. I think. So we'll see. Looking ahead to this weekend, RJ, obviously we have the live game commentary coming up early Saturday morning, 9:30 Pacific start for that game against the Flyers, and that live game commentary. Cannot wait to see what state you're in as not a morning person, as we got to kick that one off at 9:30, RJ.
It's gonna be rough, Dylan. Get ready for. Well, you know what? Here, I'll probably have a first period similar to a lot of Kraken first periods this season, where hey, I'll be
It's
ready to go.
stronger as the game goes on.
Yes, I will have a. I'll dig myself the equivalent, whatever the streaming equivalent is, of a 4-goal deficit. But then I will storm back to tie it and take the lead by the time the third period starts.
Yes. No, it should be an interesting one. We'll see what goalie we get for that. But again, it's the Flyers. This is not a good team. Like, this is one where in theory Kraken should be able to show up and play hockey that at least looks competitive, right? Like, you don't have to go out there and win. Again, for drafting reasons, it's maybe better if you don't. It's definitively better if you don't, actually. But you got to make it look good. You got to still put in effort. You still got to show up. And it's a Flyers team that, can jump on you if that's not the case. So we'll see. And I was going to say, we'll see what goalie starts for the Kraken.
Which one would you start?
I would probably start Grew.
I would too. This is absolutely the game.
This is the one.
The other game is Washington. They will make you look silly potentially. This is the game to start Grubauer. Philly's not that good, and you know what? It doesn't matter how bad
you're going to be better than the other side. That's where I was
going. The goaltending on the other side is going to be worse than yours. You can count on that, and so that's why it's the game to start him. Definitely.
That's totally where I was going with all this, because I was like, it does not matter who the Kraken start. It doesn't even matter who the Flyers start. You should have better goaltending than they do. And so that should help make the game competitive. It should help kind of motivate the Kraken and get them going. But I think it's really important that we see them bounce back from the effort in this one and at least play a tough game against Philadelphia. I think that's needed.
Definitely. And as Alex is saying, they're going to work hard, but they're short on the talent side. So if you work hard, you should win that game. If you match their energy, the Kraken should win. And so that's the measuring stick you want, right? You don't want to face some, like Washington, some buzzsaw of a team that's near top of the league. You want to face a team that's going to make you earn things. But, if you do go earn them, you're going to win.
Yep. Definitely. So we'll see what they have. Again, we'll see with all of the wonderful patrons that we have over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey for that live.
It's an ABC game.
Yes, it is. National game, Saturday morning. We'll see what they've got for it. Appreciate everybody joining us. Appreciate all the super chats. Definitely appreciate the Beer Hall for sponsoring us. As always, cannot wait for those 2 watch party events. March 19th at the Queen Anne Beer Hall, and then April 2nd at Moss Bay Hall. Those should be fantastic ones. Can't wait for it. Appreciate you all, and we will see you all next time.